I stood outside the lawyer's office, my palms sweating against the brushed steel door handle, when I heard my brother's voice through the frosted glass. "I don't care what the will says, Dad always wanted the house for me." "He told you that, right?" The lawyer's reply was muffled, but I caught the sharp edge in her tone. My brother, always the golden boy, always so sure the world, and especially our family's legacy, would bend to his will. I pressed my forehead to the cold glass, heart pounding, hearing the words changing the shape of my future without my consent. I shouldn't have been surprised. My father had only been dead for 3 weeks, and already the vultures were circling. But I'd clung to the hope that, this time, things would be fair. That I wouldn't be erased from the family story, not again. My brother's voice rose, indignant. He was confused at the end. He didn't mean to split it like that. And then, quietly, almost pleading, "It's always been mine. You know that. My name is David Penrose. I'm 44 years old, a high school English teacher in upstate New York." I'd driven 2 hours from my small rented apartment in Ithaca for this meeting, one I dreaded and, in a way, believed would finally prove that I was part of this family, that my father saw me, too. This is the story of how everything fell apart. I grew up in the shadow of my brother, Michael. He's 3 years younger but has always seemed older, more confident, more charming, able to draw people to him with that easy grin. Our parents adored him. He was the quarterback, the debate champion, the son who stayed close and joined Dad's law firm after college, the one who brought kids over for Sunday dinners, who called Mom every week until she died. I was quieter. Loved books, not parties. I moved away after college, took up teaching. I never married. My mother used to say, "You were always so independent," not exactly an accusation, but not praise either. My father and I got along better after she died, but there was always a carefulness in our conversations, as if we were walking across thin ice. When Dad's cancer came back, I offered to move in, help with his care, but Michael insisted on hiring a nurse. "You're busy, Dave. Dad wants his routine." So I visited on weekends, cooked his favorite meals, and sometimes, just sometimes, I'd catch a look in his eye, a sadness, maybe, or regret. But he never said anything. The last time I saw him, he squeezed my hand and said, "You're a good man, David. I'm proud." He meant it, I think. I want to believe he did. The day I got the call from the lawyer, I was grading essays. The voice on the other end was brisk. "Mr. Penrose, your father's will is scheduled for reading on Friday at noon. Please be in attendance." I didn't ask questions. I assumed, wrongly, that Michael and I would sit together, 2 grown men mourning together, and whatever Dad had left, we'd share. Instead, I found myself standing outside the lawyer's office, listening to my brother lobbying for his birthright as if I was already an afterthought. I pushed open the door as quietly as I could, trying not to show how much I'd heard. Michael glanced up, his expression flipping from irritation to practiced warmth in a heartbeat. "Hey, Dave. You made it." The lawyer, Ms. Alston, barely looked up as she gathered her papers. "Let's begin." We sat opposite each other, the heavy oak table between us. The office was orderly, impersonal, certificates on the walls, the faint scent of lemon polish. I wondered if Dad had sat here, making his own final arrangements, thinking about how his 2 sons would remember him by the end of all this. Ms. Alston's reading of the will was mercilessly efficient. Standard legalese, bequests to charity, mention of a few old family friends. Then, to my eldest son, David Penrose, I leave the sum of $25,000 and my collection of books. The words hit me like a slap. She continued, unblinking, to my younger son, Michael Penrose, I leave the house at 17 Willow Lane, its contents, and all remaining assets, including the entirety of my retirement accounts. I sat there, numb, as Michael's lips curled in something between relief and satisfaction. He flicked a glance at me, just for a second, before looking down at his phone. The meeting ended with a flurry of signatures. Michael shook the lawyer's hand, promised to send over some paperwork. I tried to speak, something about splitting the house, honoring Dad's wishes, but Michael cut me off. "It's all spelled out, Dave. I'm sorry if you feel it's not fair, but Dad knew what he wanted. He told me, you know. As if that settled it. I left the office shaking, my chest hollow. On the drive home, I kept replaying my father's last words to me. Was I really just the kid who moved away, the quiet one, someone grateful for a pat on the head and a box of old books? Was that all I'd ever meant to him? The days that followed were a fog of grief and anger. I called the lawyer, asked her to explain. She was sympathetic but firm. The will is clear, David. Unless you can prove undue influence or lack of capacity, there's nothing to contest. I tried to tell myself to let it go. But the hurt gnawed at me, and with every hour, it became less about the money or the house and more about what had always been missing: recognition, fairness, a simple acknowledgement that I mattered. I threw myself into my work. My students were restless, high school seniors on the verge of graduation, their essays full of half-formed dreams. I envied their certainty. The news about my father's will must have spread quickly, because a few colleagues offered awkward condolences, and one even said, "Well, at least your brother's nearby to take care of things." Always Michael. Always the one who stayed. One night, I called my aunt, my mother's sister. She'd always been kind to me as a child, sneaking me extra dessert at holidays, listening when I felt invisible. I told her about the will, hoping for some comfort. She was silent for a long moment. Then she said, carefully, "Your father, he loved you, David. But your brother's always had a way of getting what he wants. You know that. Did Dad talk to you before he died? About the house?" She hesitated. "He said he wanted things to be fair. That he was proud of you. But Michael was with him for every meeting with the lawyers." I don't know what was said. I hung up, feeling emptier than before. My relationship with Michael had always been a careful dance. Growing up, I admired his confidence, even as I resented the way Mom and Dad doted on him. If he wanted something, he got it: a new bike, a car for his 16th birthday, the last piece of pie at Thanksgiving. I convinced myself it didn't matter, that I was above it. I had my books, my own life. But sitting in my one-bedroom apartment, surrounded by boxes of papers and lesson plans, I realized how much I'd let myself believe the fantasy that my family would one day see me as an equal. A week after the will reading, Michael called. I almost didn't answer. "Hey, Dave. Just wanted to let you know I'll be clearing out some stuff from Dad's house this weekend. If you want any of the books or anything, come by." His tone was casual, almost magnanimous. I swallowed my pride. "I'll come on Saturday," I said. He sounded relieved, as though he was worried I'd make a scene or demand more than my share. "Great. See you then." Saturday was gray and cold. The house at 17 Willow Lane looked smaller than I remembered, shrunken, empty. Michael answered the door in jeans and a flannel shirt, hair tousled in that effortless way of his. The living room was full of boxes, furniture pushed to the sides like a yard sale waiting to happen. He led me to the study. Dad's books lined the walls, some leather-bound and cracking, others with dog-eared pages from endless rereadings. I started pulling down the ones that meant something to me: the first edition of To Kill a Mockingbird, a battered Shakespeare collected works, a book of poetry my mother had inscribed to my father on their anniversary. Michael hovered nearby, phone in hand, texting. After a while, he said, "You know, Dad really wanted you to have those. He always said you were the reader in the family." I didn't answer. There was an awkward silence, broken only by the sound of books sliding off the shelves. He cleared his throat. "Look, Dave, I know this is weird. But you've got your life, I've got mine. The house, it just makes sense that it stays with me. You know." I wanted to scream. But instead, I nodded. "Yeah. Makes sense." When I left, my car loaded with boxes, I felt lighter and heavier at the same time. As I drove away, I caught sight of Michael standing in the doorway, waving. For a moment, I almost believed he felt sorry. But that night, as I unpacked, a slip of paper fell from the Shakespeare volume. It was a post-it, stuck between pages, my father's handwriting unmistakable, For both my sons, this house is yours together. Take care of each other. My breath caught. It wasn't a legal document, but it was a message, a kind of truth, hidden in a place only I'd find. I wanted to believe it was enough. But by the next morning, the anger was back. Michael hadn't just inherited the house, he'd inherited the role he'd always played, the one who decided what mattered, who got what, who was allowed to belong. And I was left with memories, a few books, and a handwritten note that wouldn't survive a courtroom. I tried to move on. I tried to tell myself that the house was just a place, that what mattered was my own life, my own integrity. But every time I saw Michael's posts on social media, renovating the kitchen, throwing a housewarming party with his wife and 2 kids, starting a new chapter in the family home, the bitterness burned hotter. I stopped answering his calls. We drifted further apart, our conversations reduced to awkward holiday texts. At school, I withdrew, only half listening to students' stories, going through the motions. My colleagues noticed, but I shrugged off their concern. One night, I got a call from the lawyer. Miss Alston's voice was clipped. "Mr. Penrose, I wanted to let you know that your father's estate is now closed. All assets have been transferred as per the will. Please contact me if you have any concerns." I wanted to scream at her, to demand justice, but I knew it would change nothing. A month later, my aunt called. She'd been cleaning out some old family papers and found a folder labeled Penrose Estate, Drafts. She offered to send it to me. I said yes, not expecting much. When the package arrived, I sat at my kitchen table, the city humming outside my window, and sorted through the pages. Most were old correspondence, drafts of charitable donations, notes on Dad's investments. But then I found it, a typed letter, and signed, addressed to Ms. Alston. It read, "To be clear, I want both my sons to share the house equally. Please ensure the will reflects this. Michael is to handle the paperwork, but David must always have a place here." I read it again and again, my hands shaking. The date was 2 months before Dad died. The official will had been signed 3 weeks later. A terrible suspicion formed in my gut. I pored over the rest of the papers. In Dad's wobbly handwriting, I found a list of changes, crossouts and arrows: split house 50-50, David gets study plus books, Michael, house, but David lives here anytime. None of it was in the final will. I called Ms. Alston. She sounded surprised at first, then defensive. "I can't discuss private client matters, Mr. Penrose. I found a draft. It's in Dad's handwriting. Why wasn't any of this in the final will?" A pause. "Your father met with Michael several times in his last weeks. He asked to make changes, but ultimately signed the will as it stands. Was I ever consulted? Your brother was his primary contact." I hung up, my hands shaking. I knew what had happened, even if I couldn't prove it yet. Michael had been alone with Dad for every meeting, every signature. He'd guided the process, told everyone he knew best, and in the end, got exactly what he wanted. I started to spiral. I stopped sleeping. I replayed every memory, the way Michael always smoothed things over, always charmed his way out of trouble. How he'd convinced our parents to forgive him just one more time after he wrecked the family car, how he'd talked his way into Dad's law firm, how he always managed to get more, even when he didn't deserve it. I realized, with a cold clarity, that this wasn't just about the will, or the house, or the money. It was about being erased. My breaking point came the following Sunday. I drove past Dad's house on a whim. Michael's car was in the driveway, his family was in the yard, laughing, grilling burgers. I watched from my car, invisible, as my niece and nephew ran across the grass where I'd played as a boy. Nobody noticed me. I drove home and cried, for the first time in years. I was done letting Michael rewrite the story. I spent the next week assembling everything I had: the draft letter, Dad's handwritten notes, the post-it from the Shakespeare volume. I called my aunt and asked her to write a statement about Dad's intentions. I reached out to a friend from college, now a probate lawyer, and explained the situation. She listened quietly. Contesting a will is hard, David. Especially without clear evidence of fraud. I know. But I have to try. She agreed to look over the documents. If there's any sign of undue influence, we can make a case. But be prepared, it'll get ugly. I was. For the first time, I felt a strange, cold resolve. I filed the challenge, citing undue influence and lack of capacity. Michael was served with notice. The next day, he called me, furious. What the hell are you doing, Dave? You want to drag Dad's name through the mud? You're going to ruin everything over a house. It's not just a house. It's what's fair. He cursed, then paused. You know, Dad wasn't himself at the end. He wanted me to take care of things. You've got your life, you don't need this. That's not your decision to make. He hung up. The legal process was slow, agonizing. I lost sleep, snapped at my students, ignored the world outside my phone and email. Michael's lawyer filed motions to dismiss. He called our few remaining relatives, spinning the story. Dave's always been jealous, he's lost, he's trying to get what he never earned. I heard from my aunt that he'd told everyone I was unstable, that I was breaking the family apart. I almost gave up. But every time I saw the post-it in Dad's handwriting, I remembered what was at stake. The court scheduled a mediation. I sat across from Michael in a bland conference room. He looked tired, less sure of himself, shadows under his eyes. His lawyer did most of the talking, dismissing my evidence as meaningless sentimental notes. I watched Michael fidget, his jaw clenched. I laid out my evidence, the draft letter, the handwritten notes, my aunt's statement. My lawyer pressed the point, Mr. Penrose controlled access to the decedent. There is a pattern of last-minute changes, inconsistent with earlier drafts. The mediator leaned forward. Michael, why were these changes made? Did your father consult David? Michael swallowed. Dad was confused. He wanted to keep things simple. Simple for you. He looked away. The mediation dragged on for hours. Finally, the mediator suggested a compromise: the house would be sold, proceeds split equally after debts. Michael could buy me out if he chose. The retirement accounts would remain with him. My lawyer urged me to take it. It's more than you'll get from the court. I looked at Michael, deflated, angry, but silent. For the first time, I saw him not as the golden child, but as a man afraid of losing his grip. I agreed. In the weeks that followed, Michael barely spoke to me. The house was listed, and within a month, a young family bought it. The proceeds were split. I got less than half of what the house was worth after expenses, but it was something. More than that, it was a recognition that my father's legacy didn't belong to one son alone. The fallout was brutal. My relationship with Michael is, at best, a formality now. Family holidays are awkward, conversations stilted. Some relatives blame me for airing dirty laundry. Others quietly thanked me for standing up for myself. I used my share to make a down payment on a small townhouse near my school. I kept Dad's books, the Shakespeare with the post-it still marking that page. Sometimes I take it down and reread his words, wondering if he'd be proud or ashamed of how things turned out. I think about Michael more than I'd like to admit. How he was shaped by being the favorite, how he learned to bend the rules. I wonder if he feels the loss as keenly as I do, or if, in his mind, he's still the one who won. My life is quieter now. I focus on my students, on building a home that's truly mine. I see my aunt sometimes. She comes for dinner, brings old stories and advice I never knew I needed. There are nights when I regret it all, when I wish I'd just walked away, let Michael have his victory. But mostly, I feel a muted peace. I wasn't erased, not this time. I stood up for myself, however imperfectly. In the end, I learned that sometimes justice isn't about winning, but about refusing to disappear. That's enough for me.